Picture this: a glittering wedding hall. Crystal chandeliers casting soft golden light over rows of white chairs. Laughter echoing off marble floors. And standing on that stage, microphone in hand, a heavily pregnant woman whose fingers trembled as she adjusted the stand. Her name was Leora Maren, and she was about to do something that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone in that room. She wasn't there by choice. She was there because of a lie, a cruel manipulation, and the desperate need to survive. But what happened next? Nobody could have seen it coming. Not the groom who smirked at her from the front row. Not the bride who clutched something shiny into his ear. And certainly not the 200 guests who had come expecting champagne and celebration. What they got instead was the truth. Raw, unfiltered, and delivered through the most powerful weapon Leora had ever possessed, her voice. This is the story of how one woman turned her greatest humiliation into her moment of strength, and how a wedding that was supposed to be about love became about justice. But before we understand why she was standing there, we need to go back. Because what Cassian Ward did to her wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. And someone in that room knew exactly why. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Here's what you need to understand. Leora wasn't always the woman standing on that stage, 5 months pregnant and fighting back tears. 6 years earlier, she was just a 22-year-old waitress with a voice that could stop conversations mid-sentence. She worked the night shift at a small diner in Portland, Oregon, scraping together tips and dreaming of something bigger. Music was her escape. But dreams cost money. And hope is fragile. So how did a struggling waitress end up humiliated at her ex-boyfriend's wedding? Why would Cassian Ward, a man who once promised her everything, force her to sing at his wedding to another woman? And what did he stand to lose if the truth came out? The answers begin on a rainy October evening, 6 years ago, when Leora met a man who would change her life forever. But not in the way she hoped. That's where she met Cassian Ward. He walked in one rainy October evening, umbrella dripping, his tie loosened around his neck. He ordered black coffee and sat in the back, but Leora noticed him. Everyone did. He had that kind of presence, tall, well-dressed, confident in a way that made you believe he belonged in boardrooms, not small-town coffee shops. When Leora stepped up to sing that night, she chose an old Etta James song, something soulful and aching she'd been practicing since she was 12. And when she finished, Cassian was the first one to clap. The only one, really. But he clapped louder than anyone else in the room. They started talking that night. He told her he was in town for business, that he worked in commercial real estate, that he traveled a lot. Leora told him about her dreams of becoming a professional singer, about the demo tape she'd been saving up to record. He listened in a way that made her feel seen. Really seen. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't just sponsoring her, someone believed in her. Or at least, that's what she thought. But Cassian Ward wasn't in Portland for business. He was there to escape. And Leora was about to become the perfect cover for a secret he couldn't afford to reveal. They started dating within a week. He took her to nice restaurants, bought her gifts, and most importantly, he encouraged her music. He even offered to pay for her demo tape recording. "You're going to be huge one day," he'd say. "This is an investment." Leora fell hard. She introduced him to her grandmother, her one remaining family. Her grandmother was skeptical at first. "He seems too polished," she said one evening over tea, her weathered hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "What does a man like that want with a girl like you?" It wasn't cruel, it was protective. But Leora didn't want to hear it. She wanted to believe in the fairy tale. One Sunday morning, Cassian surprised her by showing up at her apartment with fresh pastries and coffee. They sat on her tiny balcony overlooking the street, and he asked her to sing for him. Just for him, no audience, no pressure. So she did. She sang softly, her voice barely above a whisper, and when she finished, he reached across the small table and took her hand. "You have no idea how special you are," he said. And in that moment, Leora believed him. She believed every word. For 8 months, it felt real. Cassian would fly her out to Seattle on weekends. He'd talk about their future, about buying a house, about her recording her first album. He even introduced her to Dorian Crest, his best friend and business partner, who seemed charming enough. But Dorian watched her carefully. Too carefully. Like he knew something she didn't. One evening, after Cassian stepped away to take a phone call, Dorian leaned in and said quietly, "Be careful with him, Leora. He's not who you think he is." She laughed it off, but the warning lingered. And then, one December morning, everything changed. Leora discovered she was pregnant. And when she told Cassian, the man she loved looked at her like she'd just destroyed his life. Leora took the test 3 times before she believed it. She was terrified, yes, but also hopeful. Maybe this was the push they needed. Maybe this would make them a real family. She called Cassian and asked him to meet her at their favorite park bench overlooking the river. When she told him, his face drained of color. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I'm sure." There was a long silence, the kind that stretches and warps until it becomes unbearable. Then he said, "We need to fix this." "Fix this?" Leora repeated, her voice trembling. "Leora, I can't. I'm not ready for this. My family, my business. This isn't the right time." "Your family?" She stared at him. "Cassian, what are you talking about?" That's when he told her the truth. He wasn't just some real estate investor. He was Cassian Ward, heir to the Ward Group, a billion-dollar commercial development empire. His mother, Evangeline Ward, controlled the company with an iron fist. And she had very specific expectations for her son's future. "My mother's health is failing," he said, his voice tight. "She's rewriting her will. If I don't present the right image, stable, married to the right kind of woman, I lose everything. The company goes to my cousin." "The right kind of woman?" Leora whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Leora sat alone in her apartment, staring at the pregnancy test on the coffee table. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The shock was too deep, the betrayal too complete. She just sat there in the dark, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, wondering how someone she loved could disappear so completely. How someone could become a stranger in a single conversation. And this was only the beginning. Because 3 weeks later, Cassian Ward sent Leora a check for $50,000, a legal document relinquishing all parental rights, and a single text message, "Don't contact me again." Leora was shattered. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She lost her job at the diner after missing too many shifts. Her grandmother tried to help, but she was elderly and on a fixed income. Leora moved into a cheaper apartment, sold everything she could, and worked temp jobs just to cover rent and prenatal vitamins. The dream of music felt like a lifetime ago. She kept the pregnancy. Not because she was ready to be a mother, but because despite everything, this child was hers. And she refused to let Cassian Ward take anything else from her. Months passed. She heard through mutual acquaintances that Cassian was engaged to Seraphine Hale, a socialite whose family owned half the waterfront properties in Seattle. Perfect image. Perfect match. Leora tried not to care. One afternoon in her 4th month, Leora walked through a small thrift store, her fingers trailing over tiny onesies and knitted blankets. She picked up a soft yellow sleeper with little ducks on it and held it against her chest. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. This was real. This was hers. She bought the sleeper, a small stuffed bear, and a book about lullabies from around the world. And that night, alone in her apartment, she sang softly to her growing belly, a song her grandmother used to sing, about hope and resilience and love that doesn't give up. But then, one afternoon in her 5th month of pregnancy, Leora received a phone call that made her blood run cold. It was from Dorian Crest, and what he asked her to do was unthinkable. "Leora, it's Dorian." She almost hung up. "I know you don't want to hear from us," he said quickly. "But Cassian has a proposition. I don't want his money. It's not about money. It's about closure." He explained that Cassian's wedding was in 2 months. A massive event, 300 guests, held at the Bellerive Estate, one of the most exclusive venues in the Pacific Northwest. He wants you to perform, Dorian said. Leora laughed bitterly. You're joking. He'll pay you $30,000. One song. You'll be introduced as a professional vocalist he's supporting. No one needs to know about your history. Why would I ever agree to that? Because you need the money, Leora. And because if you don't, Cassian's legal team will tie you up in custody battles the moment that baby is born. It was a trap. A cold, calculated trap. And Leora knew it. But she also knew that $30,000 could change everything: childcare, medical bills, a chance to rebuild. So, against every instinct screaming at her to refuse, she said yes. That evening, Leora met with Maeve Calder at a quiet cafe near the clinic. Maeve ordered them both chamomile tea and waited for Leora to speak. I'm doing something stupid, Leora said finally. How stupid? I'm singing at Cassian's wedding. Maeve set down her cup slowly. Leora, no. He's paying me $30,000. He's humiliating you. I know. Leora's voice cracked. But I need the money, Maeve. I need it so badly. Maeve reached across the table and took Leora's hand. Then we'll make sure you walk out of that wedding with your head high, she said firmly. Whatever happens, you're not alone. And for the first time in months, Leora felt like maybe she could survive this. The weeks leading up to the wedding were agony. Leora practiced her song in her tiny apartment, her hands resting on her growing belly, wondering what kind of person she'd become, someone who'd let herself be humiliated for money. On quiet nights, Leora began writing letters to her unborn child. Dear little one, I don't know if you'll ever read these, but I want you to know that everything I'm doing for you. Even the hard things. Even the things that make me feel small. Your father doesn't want us. But that's okay, because I want you enough for both of us. And someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you the story of how I found my voice again. How I sang for you, even when the world tried to silence me. Love, Mama. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a small wooden box her grandmother had given her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the need to prove she hadn't been erased. Or maybe, deep down, she wanted Cassian to see what he'd done, to look her in the eye and feel something. Anything. A week before the wedding, Leora received a package. Inside was a dress, elegant, beautiful-looking red dress, with a flowing silhouette designed to tastefully conceal her pregnancy, as the note said. It felt like a costume for her own humiliation. That night, as Leora hung the dress in her closet, a memory surfaced unbidden. Cassian, months ago, spinning her around in his Seattle apartment, laughing as he told her she looked beautiful in red. You should always wear this color, he'd said, kissing her forehead. Now, staring at the red dress, she felt sick. Even her humiliation had been carefully curated. But what Leora didn't know was that someone else had been watching this entire arrangement unfold. Someone with their own reasons to see Cassian Ward's perfect wedding fall apart. And they were about to set a plan in motion. The Bellerive estate was breathtaking. Rolling lawns, string lights, a glass pavilion overlooking the water. Leora arrived early, as instructed, and was escorted to a side room where she was told to wait until her performance slot. She sat alone, her heart pounding, her hands cold. Through the window, she could see guests arriving. Women in designer gowns, men in tailored suits, a champagne tower being assembled on the terrace. This was Cassian's world, and she was just a pawn in it. In another wing of the estate, Seraphine Hale stood before a full-length mirror, her mother adjusting the veil over her dark hair. You look perfect, darling, her mother cooed. But Seraphine's hands were shaking. She'd overheard something the night before, whispers between Cassian and Dorian about managing the situation and keeping things under control. When she'd asked Cassian about it, he'd kissed her forehead and said, "Wedding jitters. Don't worry." But she was worrying, because something about the way he said it felt like a lie. Her bridesmaid, Celeste, entered the room carrying a bouquet. "Sarah, there's a pregnant woman here," Celeste said carefully. "She's supposed to perform. Did you know about this?" Seraphine's stomach dropped. What? And as the ceremony music began to play, two women, neither of whom had chosen to be there, were about to collide in a moment that would change everything. Before Leora could process what was happening, the door to her waiting room opened, and in walked Evangeline Ward, Cassian's mother. Evangeline was a striking woman in her 70s, silver hair, sharp eyes, impeccable posture. She studied Leora for a long moment. "So you're the girl," she said finally. Leora stood, her pulse racing. "I'm just here to sing." "I know why you're here. My son thinks he's very clever." "Then you know what he's doing." Evangeline's expression didn't change. "I know my son is a coward, and I know you're carrying my grandchild." Leora's breath caught. "How?" "I have resources, Miss Maren, and I'm not a fool." Evangeline stepped closer. "Cassian thinks he can control the narrative, marry the right woman, erase his mistakes, secure his inheritance. But he underestimated two things." "What?" "You. And me." Evangeline explained that she'd known about the pregnancy for months. She'd hired a private investigator when Cassian started acting erratically, secretive phone calls, sudden trips to Portland, unusual financial transfers. "I wanted to see what kind of woman you were," Evangeline said. "Whether you'd take his money and disappear, or whether you had a spine. And you're still here. That tells me enough." Then Evangeline handed Leora a small envelope. "This is a recording of a conversation Cassian had with Dorian 3 days ago. He doesn't know I have it, but after you sing tonight, I suggest you play it for everyone in that room." Leora's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "Sometimes the truth is the only inheritance worth giving." She didn't listen to it. Not yet. But she knew it would change everything. As guests mingled during the cocktail hour, Seraphine caught fragments of conversations. "Did you see her? The singer. She's pregnant. Cassian invited her?" Seraphine's heart hammered in her chest. She pulled Dorian aside near the terrace. "Who is she?" Seraphine demanded. Dorian looked uncomfortable. "She's a vocalist. Cassian wanted to support local talent." "Don't lie to me, Dorian. Who is she?" He hesitated. "Ask your fiancé." Seraphine found Cassian near the bar, his smile wide, his posture relaxed. "Cassian, who is that woman?" "What woman?" "The pregnant singer." His smile faltered for just a second. "She's nobody. Just someone I hired." "Then why does everyone seem so uncomfortable?" "Seraphine, it's our wedding day. Let's not." "Is she your ex?" Silence. And in that silence, Seraphine understood. But she didn't leave. Not yet. Because Seraphine Hale had been raised to never cause a scene. So she swallowed her humiliation, straightened her veil, and walked back into the reception hall, where Leora Maren was about to step onto the stage. Just before Leora was called to perform, Dorian appeared in her waiting room. His face was pale, his tie loosened. "Leora, I need to tell you something." She turned slowly. "What?" "I warned him not to do this." His voice was low, urgent. "I told him it was cruel, that you didn't deserve this. But he wouldn't listen." "Then why didn't you stop him?" "Because he's my best friend. And I'm a coward." Dorian's hands shook. "But you should know, he's not doing this just to humiliate you. He's doing it because he's terrified." "Of what?" "Of you. Of what you represent. Of the fact that you're the only person who's ever made him feel something real. And he can't control that." Leora stared at him. "That doesn't make it okay." "I know, but I thought you should know." Dorian paused. "Whatever you do out there tonight, he deserves it." And as Dorian left, Leora realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming the part of herself that Cassian had tried to erase. Her voice, her truth, her power. As Leora stood in the hallway behind the stage, waiting for her cue, she heard voices, Cassian and another groomsman, talking near the side entrance. "I can't believe you actually brought her here," the groomsman said, laughing. "It's brilliant, actually," Cassian replied. "She gets paid. I get to show everyone I've moved on. And she'll be too humiliated to ever come after me again. What if she says something? She won't. She needs the money too badly. And even if she does, who's going to believe her?" Leora's hands clenched into fists. Who's going to believe her? She would make them believe. And when the announcement came, "Please welcome to the stage Leora Maren," she walked into that reception hall not as a victim, but as a woman who had nothing left to lose. The ceremony had been flawless. Seraphine looked radiant in ivory lace. Cassian looked confident, composed, every inch the successful heir. No one mentioned the pregnant woman waiting backstage. During the reception, Dorian introduced Leora as a gifted vocalist Cassian has graciously chosen to support.
Gasps.
Whispers. Eyes on her belly. She walked slowly to the microphone, feeling the weight of every stare. Cassian watched from the front table, his smile tight. Seraphine looked confused, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Guests whispered, "Is that? She's pregnant." Why would he? Phones came out. People started recording. Leora adjusted the microphone. And then she spoke. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "My name is Leora Maren, and I'm here tonight because the groom asked me to sing. But before I do, I think you all deserve to know why." Cassian stood abruptly. "Leora, this is your child, Cassian." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. 6 months ago, I told you I was pregnant, and you paid me to disappear. You sent legal threats. You erased me. And tonight, you brought me here to humiliate me one last time, to prove to everyone that I'm nothing. Seraphine's face went white. Her hands covered her mouth. Evangeline remained perfectly still, watching with an unreadable expression. Guests gasped audibly. Phones raised higher. Whispers turned to murmurs. An older woman near the back stood up, her face filled with disgust. A younger man shook his head and set down his champagne glass. The room was turning. "But I'm not nothing," Leora continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm a woman who loved someone who didn't deserve it. And I'm a mother who will make sure my child never doubts their worth." She pulled out the USB drive. "And before I sing, I think you should all hear this." A staff member connected the drive to the sound system. The audio was clear, devastating. Cassian's voice. "She's desperate, Dorian. She'll do anything for money. Once she sings, she'll be humiliated in front of everyone who matters. No one will ever believe her story. And if she tries to fight me legally, I'll bury her." Dorian's voice. "And if your mother finds out?" "Cassian, she won't. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll already have control of the company." The room erupted. Seraphine stood, tears streaming down her face, her veil slipping from her hair. She looked at Cassian, this man she thought she knew, and felt something inside her shatter. "You used me," she whispered. "Seraphine, wait. You used both of us." She turned and walked out of the hall, her bridesmaids rushing after her. Guests began shouting. "This is disgusting. Someone call his mother." "Get out, Cassian." Evangeline rose slowly, her gaze fixed on her son. "Cassian," she said coldly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're done here." And then Leora did something no one expected.
She sang.
She chose a song her grandmother used to sing, a hymn about resilience, about rising from ashes, about the strength it takes to survive when the world tries to break you. Her voice filled the hall.
Pure.
Powerful. Unbreakable. She sang every note with the weight of her pain, her betrayal, her hope. She sang for her unborn daughter. She sang for every woman who'd ever been told she was nothing. She sang for herself. Guests wiped their eyes. Some stood. A few began to clap softly, then louder, until the applause was thunderous. Even some of Cassian's own family members were standing, their faces filled with shame and respect. Cassian sat frozen, his empire crumbling around him. And Leora Maren, 5 months pregnant and stronger than she'd ever been, took her final bow. The wedding ended in chaos. Seraphine Hale broke off the engagement within hours and returned to her family's estate, where she spent months rebuilding her sense of self. She later sent Leora a handwritten letter. "Thank you for your courage. You saved both of us. Evangeline Ward removed Cassian from the company's succession plan and transferred a significant portion of her estate into a trust for her grandchild. She hired Alistair Rowan, her longtime attorney, to ensure Cassian could never contest it. Cassian Ward's reputation was destroyed. The recording went viral. Business partners distanced themselves. Invitations stopped coming. The empire he'd sacrificed everything to secure slipped through his fingers. And Leora? She moved to a small coastal town with Maeve's help, far from the noise. The house was modest but warm. White walls, large windows overlooking the ocean, a small nursery painted soft yellow. She gave birth to a healthy daughter, Leora, 4 months later. On quiet mornings, she would sit in the rocking chair by the window, Leora in her arms, and sing softly, songs about strength, about survival, about the kind of love that doesn't need permission or approval. She never recorded that album, but she sang to her daughter every night. She taught music lessons twice a week at the local community center. She built a life that was small, but it was hers. Evangeline visited twice a year, quietly building a relationship with her granddaughter, not trying to control or interfere, but simply wanting to be present. Not perfect, not a fairy tale, but real. On Leora's first birthday, Leora opened the wooden box and reread the letters she'd written during her pregnancy. Then she wrote one more. Dear Leora, you're 1 year old today, and I want you to know that the night I sang for you, the night I stood on that stage and told the truth, was the night I became the mother you deserved. Not perfect, not fearless, but brave enough to fight for us. Your father made his choice, but I made mine too, and I chose you. Love always.
Mama.
Here's what Leora learned. Sometimes the people who hurt you don't get punished in the ways you imagine. Sometimes justice isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply walking away with your dignity intact and building a life they can never touch. Your voice, the one they try to silence, is yours. And no one can take that from you. The world will try to make you small. It will try to convince you that survival means silence. But survival can also mean singing. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What would you have done in Leora's position? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about courage, resilience, and the moments that change everything. Because some songs don't just end weddings. They end lies. And they begin legacies.